Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is John, and it has been a kind of a hot minute since I posted anything substantial here. I live in the Midwest, and we had an actually pretty extended and fairly cold winter, especially compared to previous years. So I wasn't getting a whole lot of props finished in the garage. It was very cold to work in. You never know how paint's going to react. So that did kind of leave me wanting to make something, but not really knowing what, right? So I started searching for props that I could make that didn't require a lot of post-processing. As you can see, I generally post-process most of the things that I make, and that means sanding or resin filling, Bondo, spray paint, layering, primer filler, all sorts of stuff that goes involved into making it go from a basic print to more of a finished product. But not being able to work in the garage, I was kind of left stranded, and I wanted something that I could still work on that didn't require me to spend that much time in the garage or to rely on paint in really cold weather and how that was going to react. So I did find a few fun props here that I want to take you guys through today that require very minimal post-processing, literally no sanding involved in any of these, just some dry brushing, a little bit of black washing, and just some things to bring out some of those details in these props to make them look a little bit nicer. But for the most part, basically print-ready props. The first prop I got into here is Echo Mask from the series Arcane, based on the game League of Legends. I don't actually know if he's a character in League of Legends or not, but this mask is from Yosh Studios, and it prints in 3 parts. Now you can see here, I did print the damaged version, if that will focus on here, so you can see some of those cracks in there. And that's really all the post-processing we're going to have to do on this. You don't really even need to do it, but we are going to go through and fill those cracks in with an acrylic pen or a Sharpie or something. You can see these white parts. These were printed in a matte white filament to kind of minimize those layer lines, and you can see how well those prints came out. There's a couple areas up in here that are a little rough on the edges, kind of where the support interfaces were, that I'm going to have to take the deburring tool to, but that's a pretty quick cleanup. And then here's the actual gold part of the mask. This is a Sunlu gold. It is not a silk shiny gold, and I printed this one in a lower layer height. I can't remember if I did a 0.16 or a 0.12. You can kind of see with the light behind it some of that gyrated infill coming through, but really not a big deal. This print came out pretty nice looking. One of the nice things about these prints is that these supports, they just snap right off super easily, leaving pretty much no residue or any issues behind. Just a little bit of cleanup with a deburring tool, and this thing is going to be pretty much finished. Even these pesky ones along the bottom side here, these really short ones, sometimes these can get basically glued on, and they came off super easy. And now if you don't know what a deburring tool is, you should get one. It's basically an X-Acto knife with a little hooked blade. Super awesome, super useful. And we just take it along some of these edges here to just really kind of clean them up. It just slices a little bit of that off and smooths everything out. So it looks nice and crisp, exactly how we want it to be. All right, all the deburring is done and it looks really good. The next thing we want to do is we're just going to kind of fill in these cracks here. I'm just using an acrylic pen here. I am going to test this on the back side where it's going to be covered up by the area that it glues onto, just to make sure that it doesn't try to run into those layer lines. If anybody's done acrylic pens, not all of them are created equal. Sometimes they will run into the layer lines, and that's not what we're looking for. So that looks okay. I don't know that this is going to be fine enough, honestly. All right, we're switching to a Sharpie. Actually, that acrylic pen is not going to be fine tipped enough. The Sharpie will work. However, the Sharpie does have just a small bit of bleed, but I think it'll be okay. Well, all we're gonna do is just go into these little cracks here with the Sharpie, really light, and just try to give them a little bit of depth. All right, there's our first guy done. Yeah, it looks all right. You know, it did bleed just a touch, but honestly, from a distance, you can't tell at all, and it really kind of does bring out that depth, and I'm sure it'll look better once you get the whole thing assembled. All right, we've got both of our cracked areas defined with the Sharpie here. It's not perfect. but hey, it didn't require any sanding or painting, so we're going to go with it. Now the next step is just to glue it all together, and this does have, you can see these little nubs here on the sides. They just line up with little nubs here on the pieces, and a little bit of glue, and we're done. All right, and just like that, it is all done. It fits basically perfectly. I'd have to add some straps to the back to really, you know, obviously make it hold on, but all in all, a very simple project that came out pretty good. That required absolutely no sanding. I won't say no post-processing because we did use a little bit of color, but very minimal effort to make this look, in my opinion, pretty darn good. All right, the next one I wanted to show you, this is a Dragon Priest mask from the Elder Scrolls Skyrim, right? That game that's been released about 12 times so far, and maybe we'll see the 6th one day. But this is a free file. I'll link it down below. It is originally, the designer intended it to be printed in 4 different parts and put together so that you can print it on its side, meaning the layer lines, as it builds up, go with the grain of the wood texture that is on here. I decided I didn't want to do that, and I just printed it like this, standing up. So my layer lines do go left to right, which is not ideal for this, but we are going to do a couple post-processing techniques on this, no sanding, to help it just stand out a little bit and give it a little bit more depth. The first one we're going to do is a black wash, maybe a bit of a brown wash as well, and then we are going to do a little bit of dry brushing to really give this depth and make it look a little bit more like real wood. Now, if you've never done any sort of black wash or brown wash before, it's very, very simple. All you do is you get a cup with some water in it, and whatever color paint you're going to use, this is just black basic acrylic paint. I think it was like $1 at Walmart. And we just put a little bit of paint inside that water. What this does, obviously, it turns the water black. The more paint you use, the thicker it's going to go on. The less paint you use, the thinner it's going to go on, so you might need to do more coats. Not necessarily a problem, just something to be aware of. All right, then we just take our brush, and we're just going to mix that up into kind of a nice black sludge, black water. And then it is literally what it sounds like. You wash the print with the black paint water. So we take our brush and we're just gonna go over. And you're gonna go over fairly thick with this. It looks like maybe you're gonna be putting too much on, but you're gonna wipe it off after you let it sit for a minute. You're gonna wipe it off with a paper towel. And what this is going to do is allow some of that pigment to soak into kind of the deep recessed areas of the print. And when you wipe it off, you're not going to be able to wipe off those deep recessed areas, so they'll get darkened, whereas the more pronounced raised areas are going to stay pretty light. This will give the print some depth and just make it look like it's, you know, real wood, and that it's also, that it's, you know, maybe been worn, maybe been used a little bit. Just gives it, brings it to life a little bit. And so now that we've got that, we've left that on there for a minute, all we're gonna do, a couple ways you can do this. You can go through and you can blotch at it like this, smack at it, or you can go through and you can wipe. If you are wiping on this, I do recommend wiping with the grain, which would be up and down on this particular print. And you can see that as we wipe some of that off, some of that deeper stuff is going to stay in there, right? And you can already tell the difference between the untouched side and now the black wash side. It's got a little bit more depth to it. Not perfect yet, not quite where we want it to be, but definitely heading in the right direction. And so you literally are just gonna paint over this whole thing. You can even, there's a technique where you can even just dip your paper towel into the water and just kind of drag it across and dab it across. That one works too. Kind of up to you, pick your poison on how you wanna do this. And you really wanna make sure that when you're doing this, that you get into those little crevice areas and that you're not skipping over them. Water is self-leveling, so it is going to sink into those areas and try to level out a little bit on its own, but you want to make sure that you're getting your brush down in there too. And the nice thing about doing this with acrylic paint is that you can go back with it. If you feel like you put it on too thick in an area, you can go back, you can get like a wet rag and you can thin some of that out. You probably won't be able to take it back to clean unless you really scrub it, but you can thin some of that out if you get an area that's too dark, you left it on for too long and you just don't like the way it's looking. All right, so there we are after just one coat of black wash. You can already tell some of that depth coming through. It's not exactly where I want to leave it with the black wash, so I'm probably going to do another couple coat, focus on a couple little areas, just these little recessed areas, kind of get those to fill in a little bit better. And then we will move on to the dry brushing after this part dries. All right, so the black washing is done, and you can already see kind of the depth that it gives it, right? Versus if you look at the backside, what hasn't been touched or anything, not a whole lot going on there. The lighting is kind of tricking it a little bit, but you can tell that this has a lot more depth, coming alive a lot more and looking a lot more like a wooden mask instead of a plastic fake wooden mask. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is called dry brushing. If you don't know what that is, it's best done with a makeup brush, and I'm going to use this nutmeg brown color here, and we're just going to put it onto this. This is a dry brush palette. This is actually designed by Uncle Jesse. If you guys don't know who he is, if you somehow stumbled upon my side of 3D printing YouTube but haven't come across his channel, go check him out. Basically what this palette does is we're going to put a little bit of brown on here, and then we're going to dip our brush and we're going to run it through all these different textures to help take most of that paint off, make the brush as dry as possible, and then we'll go on and dry brush it. What that does is kind of the opposite of a black wash, where the water in a black wash takes the paint into the deep crevices of the print. The dry brush is going to stay mostly on these superficial raised parts and give it just a little bit more depth. Oh, you can see all I'm doing here is just spreading this around, basically just painting this whole palette, right? Trying to hit as much of the different textures possible so that we just have a very little bit left on the brush. It'll look something like that. And then this is literally what it sounds like. You're just kind of going over the areas that you want, kind of like creating highlights. This is really popular in painting like 3D miniatures for like Warhammer and games like that. But you're not going to notice like a drastic change. It's going to be pretty slow and pretty subtle. But when all is said and done, it's going to look just that much better. All right, and that is the end of the dry brushing. And let me change this angle here so that blue light's not hitting it so much. You can tell, like, this looks way better than when we started. Like, this looks like maybe wood, right? Like substantially better. It didn't require more than 10 minutes of work, no sanding involved, less than probably $10 in materials total. This is what the backside looks like without any painting or anything, so you can kind of get a comparison, and this is the finished product. Now, I'll probably hit this with a can of like matte or satin clear coat just to protect it, but this is all finished. All right, and the last project I wanted to share with you guys today that doesn't require hardly any post-processing at all is this sweet Bane mask, Bane-inspired mask, you could say. It doesn't have kind of the face thong thing that goes up from the Dark Knight Rises, and we're just going to take the supports off of this guy. They're a little more complicated than some of the other prints, but they're still just going to snap off right away. If you guys are having trouble with your support settings and you just can't get them to pop off like this, adjust your top Z axis or interface, can't remember what it's called in the slicer, on your supports. If I print in a 0.2 layer height, I put that at 0.28, pretty much across the board, and it makes supports pop off. All right, I wanted to give you guys a close-up of this mask with the supports removed. You can see it's got a really nice texture just modeled into it. That is going to go a long way to hide these layer lines. Like, even in the light reflecting there, you're not really seeing any layer lines hardly at all, right? And so this is a picture-perfect print for something that's not going to require hardly any post-processing. All we're going to do is we're just going to do a little bit of dry brushing on it, and it's mainly just going to be in these little tubes that are supposed to be a little bit more metallic, silver style color than everything else, and that's pretty much it for this one. Super, super easy, very, very cool model. And I did want to note on this that this is basically sized. I have a 23.5-inch head, and this is sized to fit me pretty much perfectly. You could probably squeeze in even a little bit bigger size head, so we'll call it a 24-inch head. I always get asked, how do you size? This one comes sized the way that it is, and it's basically a perfect fit, and it's a really, really great model. But we're just going to get on that little bit of dry brushing on there, make it look just that much nicer. All right, and for the Bane mask, we're going to do the same thing that we did for the dry brushing for the Skyrim mask, except for instead of brown, I'm going to be using this pewter gray. I think these are like 50 cents at Walmart or something. Like, they're super, super cheap acrylic paints. You can also get big sets of them on Amazon. But all you need is just a little, kind of a little drop right there on the tray. We've got a smaller makeup brush here, and same thing, we're just going to dip it in, and we're just going to run it over all of this neat texture to get basically rid of most of the paint that's on that brush. And when we feel like most of it's wiped off, we just start brushing over. And you'll see that it's a gradual change of color with most of this, because you are putting a very light amount of pigment on, and so likely you'll have to do, you know, several coats to really get it to look like you want. Sometimes you'll even do this with multiple shades of the similar color. So you'll do it with like kind of a dark gray, a light gray, and then maybe even a silver. I only have the one gray, so that's what we're doing it with. All right, and you can see the difference there. This is just one coat of simple dry brushing. Ideally, you do this with a couple different colors of gray, like I mentioned. If you don't have multiple colors of gray, you can mix gray with black to get darker and gray with white to get lighter. Or if you get a silver that has a little bit of metallic to it, that's probably even gonna make this look a little bit better. But for about, I don't know, 4 minutes of work, not too bad, and really kind of helps bring that prop to life and make it look less plastic and maybe a little more realistic, right? Obviously it's still plastic, but very cool, very, very easy thing to do to bring your prints to life. All right, guys, that is everything I have for you today. Here are all 3 of them again, finished, very low cost mods to make on these, or post-processing to make on these, and they do just go a long way to make things look better, especially the Skyrim mask. I mean, that just looked like a Halloween store printed mask, and now it looks much better, much more depth, much more realism to it. And the other ones I think look pretty nice as well. Now I got to find a place for them on the wall. We're running out of space. But definitely look into dry brushing, black washing, or a combo of both for those prints that you want to make look a little bit nicer, but you don't want to spend any time sanding or really painting and layering, things like that. Very, very easy things to do. Now that the weather has warmed up a little bit here in the Midwest, we can get back out into the garage and start doing some of these bigger projects again that require a little bit more involvement. We've got a big one coming down the pipeline. Here's a small teaser for you. Well, let me know if you know what that is down in the comments. Leave a comment if you liked something or you have any questions. I'm happy to answer all of them. It helps out with the algorithm as well. Even a smiley face or an emoji goes a long way. So thank you guys again for watching. I will catch you on the next one.